So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to Dealcasters award-winning author, acclaimed storyteller, and brand architect who knows the power of an authentic story like no other, the creative force behind Favorite Daughter Media, Sara Lohse. Welcome aboard, Sara.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Can't wait to open this book, as it says behind you, and talk about the story. First and foremost, like your book, when I took a look at it, I'm thinking, well, it'll say something about story on the front of it. But I think it's hilarious that on the front cover of your book, in bold white letters, it says, "Open this book." I'm like,
I am an author now, but a marketer first, and gotta lead with the CTA.
Right.
Tell them what you want them to do.
That is fantastic. But hey, listen, whatever gets them to do that and get into the goodness that is the crafting story. And I think we talked about this earlier, Sara. I think so many people, when they're thinking about creating content, one of the last things that they think about is telling stories and really understanding why they should and how important it is. So I want to roll this over to you and kind of, like I was one too, where I'm like, I can do this. I can speak into a mic. I can create content. I can do all these things, but you forget about like your stories and your experiences and all of those things. Why is it so important for creators to craft their ideal stories?
There's so many reasons. And you said speaking to a microphone, I'm currently feeling a lot of shame because I tell everyone to get a mic and I'm not using one right now because it decided not to work this morning. But when it goes to stories, think about how much content is just being pumped out every single day. It's like, I want to say like 80 million or 80 billion pieces of content go out online. And you're just constantly inundated with all of these messages, especially brand messages. And they kind of all start to feel the same. And they're all calls to action. They're all buy this, use this. And that no one's going to remember that.
That's right.
If you think about like any commercial that you've ever seen, that's just, you should use this because I'm telling you to. You don't want to use it and you don't remember it. But when you hear someone tell a story, that is what you remember, because the stories are what drive human connection. The stories are what get people to latch on to you, to remember what you're saying, to understand why you're saying it. And people start to trust you. They start to feel like they know who you are. And that's how you actually get them to make purchase decisions. It's not just about saying, buy this. It's about getting them to buy into you and your experience and your expertise.
Once upon a time, there was a boy named Chris, and he created a podcast business and thought that his stories weren't worthy. He thought that they weren't like headline worthy, right? They weren't, they were just ordinary. And so, spoiler alert, that's me.
Oh, that was subtle. I almost missed it.
Right. So how can someone discover what their stories are and like go through that mindset and say, hey, this is how you can make whatever that story is really pop, so that people, like you say, can develop that trust when you're trying to promote your product or your services or things like that?
I hear that all the time. Exactly what you said, is that my stories aren't important or they don't need to be told, or why would anyone care? And a lot of that comes back to the headlines, and we expect stories to be headline worthy, or we feel like in order to make someone care about a story, it has to be traumatic or dramatic or sensational. So unless you're telling your childhood trauma story, people aren't going to pay attention. Right. And it's so untrue. And it's to the point that people, if they're not telling that story, they just don't tell anything at all. But when you hear stories, the whole idea is that human connection piece. And human connection comes from shared experiences. So you tell these headline-worthy, massive, life-changing stories, and they're inspiring, but they're not really connecting to other people because you're the only one who's gone through that. But when you look at the little stories, just the everyday struggles that you go through and the little wins that you have that aren't worthy of the 9 o'clock news headline, but they're still important and they still teach you something. Everyone that's listening probably has gone through that or gone through something similar. So they're going to connect with you more than they would if you told that massive, unique story.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I think, so I think too, just the fact, because I don't know if we're going to get into this at some point, but, AI can't tell stories, right? That's part of this human connection. As much as people want to use AI to create content, it's not going to know these stories that you have, Sarah, as an example from, even what happened to you before you came on the show today, right? That's a story in and of itself.
Yeah. We're in this age of everyone wants to be a thought leader, and thought leadership is the big buzzword. But when we want to be thought leaders, we're not meant to be just giving information and statistics and facts. And the only part of what you have to say as a thought leader that can't be Googled or can't be written by ChatGPT is the story part. So if you want to actually be the value of the story and have you telling the story be the reason it has meaning, you have to use your own experiences because you can't Google that. And the best part is you also can't disprove it because I don't know if you've ever heard of an internet troll, but they are running rampant and they're going to try to disprove everything that you say. But if you're telling your own stories and basing everything off of your own experiences, they can say a fact isn't correct or a statistic is wrong, but they can't say, no, you didn't go through that.
Very good point.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as a podcaster like you are, and we are as well, obviously we're doing one right now. It's like there's factual information, and if we just showed up and did a podcast on factual information, information that exists, why would anyone want to tune in to this or listen to the podcast if they can just Google the information, right? Or use Perplexity or, whatever, it is that will. And so do you feel like really in a lot of ways, the stories are what's the true differentiator in a lot of this content?
Absolutely. I think it's not really the information that even matters so much because the information will almost always be the same. So like you said, you can just Google it. You can find it somewhere else. Someone else is going to be talking about it. But what is the differentiator is how you came to learn that information or how you've used that information and applied it to what you're doing. And when you put yourself into what you're talking about, it's suddenly different than what someone else could be talking about. You could talk about the exact same thing, but you're talking about it from a different perspective. And you learned it a different way and you've taught it a different way. Everything about your experience with it is unique. And that's why people ask me all the time, it's like, well, if I'm going on a podcast, everyone is talking about the same topic, but they're not talking about it the same way. And they're not telling the same stories. So there's still always room for more voices because there's always so many more perspectives. And if you only hear it from one perspective, you're not getting the full scope of it.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
Yeah, it feels like stories are really sort of the origin to building that community that separates and differentiates. Because listen, Jim and I do this show a lot, and we'll get on and we'll talk about a microphone, right? And it's like, well, guess what? There are tons of other people that are talking about the very same exact microphone, and that microphone in their hands is the same microphone as the one in our hands. The only difference is us. And the only way that people are going to know us is if we're sharing that information. So we started talking about AI, and unfortunately, it's like you can't avoid talking about it, and especially you, because you actually work with someone who that's his thing. Other than a red hat, AI is Larry Roberts' thing, and you do a podcast with Larry. And it's called, just for the folks that are tuning in and they want to know about this podcast, it's called Branded: Building Brands That Stick. And so make sure you look up that podcast as well. It's fantastic information, and it's great. But we talk about AI, and it does. You can't be anti-AI, right? You're working with Larry Roberts, and but. So how can you implement a lot of this AI stuff, yet still weave in your stories and make sure that is resonating along with whatever you're doing via ChatGPT or Claude or whatever else that you're using?
Yeah, I think of like ChatGPT, it should be treated as an assistant, not as an employee. And when it comes to content creation, it should be treated as a place to get ideas, not a place to create content. Because it shouldn't be the content creator. It should be the assistant helping you create the content. And the way that I've been able to use it is I'll come up with an idea, or I'll ask it to give me an idea for what's a blog that I can write. And I'll take like the bullet points of what it thinks I should talk about, because that's how ChatGPT works. It almost is always a bulleted list. It loves a bulleted list. Mm-hmm. And here's 5 key takeaways that you should touch on in this blog. Look at each of those 5 takeaways and connect it to a story. What is the story that kind of explains each takeaway? It gave you the outline. It told you what to write, but you are the one that tells the story that explains the information that I gave you.
Have you ever asked ChatGPT to tell you a story?
I think Larry actually had it write a whole children's book about a squirrel. It was called Squirrely Love. I don't think it's available on Amazon.
Wow.
Did not get published.
Well, because it wasn't good. I mean, that just doesn't sound right. Like, it kind of sounds, you remember, I'm dating myself. We're much older than you, Sarah, but there was an old song by this group called Captain and Tennille, and the song was called Muskrat Love.
Oh, yeah.
I knew that song.
Okay, smooth.
I think they mentioned it in Full House when I was like 6.
Wow. That's good. Jim and I don't feel old at all now. That's not at all. Muskrat Love. So
I am
Squirrely
like
Love.
29 and a half. So I round up. I am basically 30, and that is terrifying to me.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah. Well, don't feel bad.
Is what they
Sarah,
say.
You could be Chris or my daughter based on our age. So you're still young in our hearts. So that's okay.
And would I be the favorite daughter?
Well, since you made it favorite daughter media, yeah, you would win today.
Thank you.
But you would get scolded later about your microphone.
I get it. Okay, I'm mad at myself.
So, favorite daughter media. I think I love the title, but can you tell us the story about the name and how that came to be?
It's a different story than people expect. Part of it is the obvious, is I wanted my sister to know her place. But it really was, this wasn't on my bingo card. I had no intention of ever starting a company. And I decided to kind of like last minute, because I was in a position, I was working in finance, and I'm just not a finance professional. I could not keep faking it because I wanted everything to be pink and I wanted things to sparkle. And I have a disco ball sitting on my desk. This is not the persona of people that work in financial services. So it was almost like a last minute desperation to be able to be myself again. That I was like, I'm just going to launch a company. I'll just have a brand. And I Googled how to name a company and it was not helpful. It said to ask 3 friends for adjectives to describe you. Nice little like mood booster because apparently my friends are nice. It asked what your childhood nickname was. And mine was Bub because I was born choking and blue and I looked like a little bubble. So my dad nicknamed me after what almost killed me, as all dads do. And all of the suggestions, they just weren't resonating with me. So I just was like, if this is going to be my personal brand, this is going to be something that represents me and I represent it. What is it about myself that just feels the most intrinsically me? And I just kept thinking about my dad because he's my favorite person and being his daughter is my favorite part of who I am. So I didn't actually name it Favorite Daughter because I am the favorite daughter, though I am. I named it because my relationship with my dad is my favorite.
Nice.
So do you have conversations with your sister at all about it? Like, is it just a pebble in her shoe that you have this company? And do you relish in that?
I didn't tell her about it.
But she knows, right?
She found out. I think either my parents told her or she just found out on like social media when I made the profiles. Nice. But she did the first year I had it. She had me made one of those desk plates with my name and the logo on it. So she does accept it. But it's a memorable name and it's a conversation starter. And I paid the legal fees to have it be official. So she can't really complain. She could have done that. I beat her to the purchasing of the LLC.
We
get along really well. I find it an accomplishment when I leave professional speakers speechless.
Yeah. Well, you could always maybe, if she pays you enough, you could make it Favorite Daughters Media if she wanted to join you.
See, I like to make custom gifts for people, usually jokes. So my parents have things that say like mother of the favorite daughter, father of the favorite daughter. My neighbors saw them and they wanted ones. And now there's mugs out there that say neighbor of the favorite daughter. So I'm trying to decide what I should make my sister for her birthday. And if it should say second favorite daughter or not the favorite daughter.
Oh, runner up.
Ooh, favorite daughter runner up. Okay, I like that.
Maybe in like a ribbon that would go with it. They kind of like they give like the big ribbons they give, you know, or like a sash, like a pageant sash, you know, runner up, favorite daughter runner up.
And see, I have a cricket. Yeah, she's like the alternate. If I die, she becomes like she's like my understudy. But I have like a cricket and a sublimation printer, so I can make her any of these things and it'll look really official.
You were today years old when you realized you got on Dealcasters and you came up with runner-up favorite daughter. This is this is that you'll like. I'm so glad these are recorded. We can point and timestamp to this moment. All right,
this is a great story.
Don't tag her. Just don't tag her.
It's a great story, Chris.
Yeah, I wonder how Thanksgiving goes for your family. So
not great.
Let's talk. Let's get back on track because I really wanted some free consulting on how I could tell my story, Sarah. But but seriously, what about like you work with people to pull them apart, to pull their brains apart, and develop these stories, right? Like this is how you. This is so. I'm thinking to myself like. First of all, it feels almost like you're putting them on the couch. You know, you're giving them like it's like therapy, right? You have like how do you break down walls? Like somebody like myself, I'm not used to telling like vulnerable sort of stories. I've gotten better about it, but honestly, I'm not great about talking about things that are not some people will spill their guts. I don't have anything like, weird and violent or anything like that to talk about, but how do you get to that core? Like, is there a process that you go through? Is this in the book and you have to get the book in order to come this? Like what is that?
In the book.
What are generally maybe the steps for that you go through with people to find those stories, pull them out, and really make them memorable?
Yeah, no, you're gonna have to buy the book.
Yeah, I figured as much.
No, honestly, the first step of it is getting past the idea that the story has to be traumatic. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about stories, and the power behind stories is the emotion. And it's the emotions that drive the connections and that make things memorable and make us feel something and invoke empathy. And you actually release like dopamine when you hear, oxytocin gets released when you hear a good story. So there's like chemical reasons behind the importance of emotion. But the thing that people don't seem to understand in this aspect is that there are more emotions than just sad.
Yeah. We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show.
That's the first hurdle kind of to get past, is you don't have to tell that super personal, traumatic childhood story. And if you're struggling to get started and you're struggling to just start getting comfortable telling stories, start with a different emotion. Start with stories that are going to invoke joy. Start with stories that are going to make people laugh or make people excited. There's an entire spectrum of human emotion that when we get to the point of storytelling, we throw away a lot of the time, and we only hone in on what can I do to just pull on the heartstrings. So look past that. Look at like, what was the happiest time in your life? When were you the most excited? When were you the most anxious? When were you up all night the night before something because you're basically set to vibrate like it's Christmas morning? What was happening that day? It doesn't have to be sad.
So do you think, as an example, if Chris and I were to tell the story of how we started Dealcasters, or even how we started live streaming, after making it past the mid-century mark, is that a story people would want to listen to? Or, I think sometimes like, who cares about that?
I think great stories happen to those who can tell them. That is wise beyond my years, because I did not make that up. It is Hourglass. But it's really true. I think, especially if you have an audience that already feels like they know you and they care about you, you can tell any story and they're going to care. But when it comes to people outside of your circle that don't know who you are and they don't necessarily have a reason to want to listen to you, the story is meant to be that reason. So if you can frame it in a way that's going to matter to them, and I do a lot in like the podcast guesting space and helping people like pitch to be on a podcast. And first I tell them to have a microphone. So I'm doing great, but it's there. It's just not working. But the first thing I say is that we don't care about you. And it's a little, it sounds rude, but it means for the podcast, we care about our audience, what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And I think you have to step into the shoes of, you don't care about you either, because it's not about you. It's about the people that are listening. And that makes it a little bit easier to step away from the fear of telling the stories and of being vulnerable, because you stop making it about you. So what is it in this story that is important for someone else to hear? What is it in this story that had such an impact on me that I wanted to have impact on others? So it no longer becomes like, well, it's just a stupid story about me. Why would people care? It becomes a story that they can relate to and pull something from. So maybe there's people out there that are past that 50 mark and they want to start doing something, but they're afraid to. You telling that story shows them like, oh, well, if they did it, so can I.
Right.
So some of those shared experiences haven't happened yet, but you're giving them the opportunity to realize that they can have that same experience.
I love that. I think that, I mean, the fact that you just said, stop thinking about it has to be traumatic and start thinking about other emotions. I mean, I've heard myself say this a million times to other people who are learning about podcasting or prospects that I talk to in doing remote production or whatever. And it's like your podcast needs to evoke some sort of feeling, and it can be sad or it can be happiness. It can be entertaining. This is why, comedy podcasts are so popular and why people love, and follow and watch people that go on tour as comedians, right? And maybe every once in a while they're going to tell a sad story, but it might be weird. But in whatever case, and be educational too is another thing that we tell people. But you always think about, let's go through the steps of whatever this is that we're talking about, but we don't think about wrapping a story into it. It's just not the first thing that I can think of. Somebody will ask me a question and I don't go, like if somebody were to say to me, why doesn't Sarah's mic work? And I would say, well, it's probably the cable, or it could be, this, that, or the other. See what I'm doing right here? This is a show of callbacks. And so, but I don't think to myself, and I should have done this, instead of you feeling flustered that your microphone wasn't working before we were going on, I could tell you a story about a time where my microphone didn't work. And how, in other words, like, let's turn this into something that we can connect on. And all of a sudden, maybe, and you weren't stressful. You're a pro. You understand, like, these things happen. But you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't think about...
The funny thing is I did that. And sometimes storytelling in contexts like these is so subtle that you don't notice it. But I pulled it into, I talk to people about being a podcast guest. And one of the things that I always say is have a mic. And then I go on a podcast and my mic doesn't work. That's a story.
Yeah. But you have a mic. It's just...
I have it. It's just not working. And it's an expensive one too. Like Larry actually spent some money on it. But we think that stories have to be long or have to be super detailed or have to have a beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes a story is just a few words. And if you've ever looked at like 5-word stories or the best like 3-word stories, and they tell so much and they evoke so much emotion with just a few words, you can do that too. You don't have to tell a really long story that's going to take a few minutes and have all these details. Just throw something in, like a little aside, and keep moving. And people don't even realize you're doing it.
That's fascinating. I've never heard that before, a 3 or 5-word story. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I mean, for me, I'm a simple guy, and I could probably do 5 words.
3 words. She said yes.
Ah.
All I said were 3 words, but you kind of know the story. You know what happened. You know the emotions. This is a good thing. We're excited.
Yeah.
But all I said was, she said yes.
Are you by chance a songwriter?
No. And nor am I a singer, and nor shall I try to be.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you to sing.
I'm a book writer.
Okay. Well, yes, you are.
Yes. Open this book.
That was an excellent segue, by the way. I was so excellent. I wasn't even ready to push the button. The book is called "Open This Book: The Art of Storytelling for Aspiring Thought Leaders" by Sara Lohse, and it's available on Amazon. And if you're on Amazon, Dealcasters.live, it's there in the carousel. And there's other things associated, like a workbook. Did I see that as well?
Yeah. So the book itself is part journal. I think if I'm going to tell you to tell stories, and the title of the book is actually kind of a pun, because it's not just open this book because I want you to open it. It's open this book because I want you to become an open book. And I teach all of the concepts through my own stories. So it's almost like a memoir, which is weird to have at 28. But I want you to actually take what I'm like trying to teach and take these ideas and these concepts and put them into action. So it's filled with writing prompts and journal entries. And for those who don't want to buy the book and they just want the journal, I do have it separate as a free download at openthisjournal.com.
Nice. So when we first put together the show and you saw the thumbnail and you know, we got all your stuff and you sent over, you know, we've got all the bio, the headshots, all of that stuff. One of the pictures that you sent, you can kind of, for those of you watching, you can see it over my left shoulder, your right shoulder over here. And it's got a really cool tattoo that's going down your arm. And I thought, well, this is cool. That's cool. You were very proud of that tattoo, and you're putting your elbow on the table, and that tattoo is very visible. I was like, well, this is someone who is very proud of their tattoos, right? Yeah. What does that say? Does it say something? Those words? I can't.
Yes, it's very hard to read cursive because my other words are very easy to read. But it says Vero Mundo, which is see the world in Portuguese.
Nice.
And if anyone speaks Portuguese and tells me I'm wrong, I'm going to be sad. So keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Marco is watching on Amazon, on LinkedIn, and he's in Portugal. So Marco, don't say anything.
I did get it done in Portugal by a Portuguese tattoo artist, and she said it was right, and we triple checked it. So
all right.
So you have a story as it relates to not that tattoo, but another tattoo that you have.
Oh, look at the time. I gotta go.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been nice. Did that microphone stop working now, or?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm going through a tunnel.
Should I show that? I mean, I don't know. Actually, Jim, I don't know if we could do that on Amazon. I guess we're going to find out. But I'd love to hear about this famous tattoo that you have.
So I am known as the girl with the penis tattoo.
Mm.
And I did not become known as that on purpose. I'm sure it seemed like that's what I aspired to be as a child. I was like, when I grow up, I want to be the girl with the penis tattoo. It was completely an accident because I went to Ireland on a solo trip and I asked for an airplane as a commemorative, like, find the next adventure. You flew here all by yourself. They didn't like tourists. And my airplane had a phallic shaped appendage coming off of it. Yeah. At least show the after though. Like, it looks good now.
And there's, yes. I love this. For those of you who are just listening, you can go to favoritedaughtermedia.com/tattoo. And we're showing it here on the screen live. And hopefully it will remain live.
You may not have noticed too. It's, where are we? Yeah. Oh. My illustrator actually traced it and put it on the cover of the book.
Nice.
Because the entire story is in the book.
The after version. Okay.
Oh, it's inappropriate.
So here's the after version. It is an actual 747 or whatever that is, playing with a kind of a stamp, very travel, but yeah,
world traveler. Yes,
we're gonna do this really quickly one more time, but you can go to favoritedaughtermedia.com/tattoo. Before, whoops, after, much better. Okay.
Shout out to Josh.
Yes,
fixing that. That story was never meant to be told anywhere outside of the bar I worked at the time that I would tell to get sympathy tips. It was not supposed to be the story that became the premise of my first book, but here we are. I was at Podcast Movement in 2021, I think, maybe 2019. I don't even know. It was in Nashville. And I was working in finance. I was the director of marketing for a financial advising firm. The CEO hosted a podcast and I produced it. And I wanted to get him booked as a guest on Stacking Benjamins, which is, if no one's familiar, it's a really popular, amazing financial podcast.
Great podcast, yeah.
Which is, a financial advisor would make a really great guest for a finance show. So I stalked Joe, the host, for 3 days. And I don't want you to hear stalked and think the wrong thing. I literally stood at a cocktail table hiding behind a book.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about the game changer for your audio setup. Of course, it's the one and only Shure SM7B microphone. This iconic beauty is a go-to for top-notch podcasts. You've seen it on stream. It's the perfect microphone for any environment. You don't need a fancy studio. It's got built-in protection that handles background noise like a pro. Jim and I love ours, and you can level up your audio game today. Just check out the show notes for the links. Now back to the show.
It was John Lee Dumas's book, so at least it was like it fit.
On brand. Yeah.
Yeah. I might as well have had a newspaper with the eyes cut out. And I stalked him for 3 days. I finally get to, I'm passing him in the hallway, and he's alone, which he's never alone. He's a celebrity at that conference. And I meant to yell to him. I think I yelled at him. And I just on the eye, and he's like, yeah. So I have to get the host of my show on your podcast or else I'll be fired. And I've been casually stalking you for 3 days to do it. And he didn't call security, which is questionable. But he said, let's meet for coffee tomorrow and I will tell you how to pitch. And gave me his phone number. I said, children, don't do that.
Right.
So I meet him the next morning, and he lets me give my pitch, which I had no idea how to pitch, no idea what I was doing. And I just spewed off all of these facts, and he's an expert in this, and he's got these letters after his name and all of that. And he just looks at me after and says, that's great. I don't want an expert. I want someone with a cool story.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a stroke, maybe. Because I said to an actual adult person that I respected, do you want to hear about the time I got a tattoo of a penis while I was in Ireland? And that's how I accidentally got myself booked on one of the biggest finance podcasts out there.
That is quite the story.
So
that's also how my parents found out. That's what the tattoo used to be.
Oh, wow.
But you're still the favorite daughter.
I had already bought the licensing.
Right. No matter what they think, you still have the .com, right?
Things not good.
That's
I can still
amazing.
put it on a t-shirt.
Well, so what was going through your brain before that came out of your mouth? Like, were you just like, I'm just going to say this, or did it? You like you said you were
I think
you were having
blacked out.
Yeah, sounds like it. Wow.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. It wasn't my best moment, but it worked.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
you never know about the results.
So it
But
got you
now-
on the show. Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
It got me on the show, which was not my intention, but turned out to be pretty cool because I had never been on a podcast before. And I always tell people, like, start small. Start on like the smaller, just getting started podcasts.
Right.
And I started on the one that is one of the biggest, most well-known shows in finance. Again, I don't listen to my own advice. And he is a master storyteller and a master interviewer. And he just knows how to pull information out of somebody. And he wanted the story on his show because it's a great hook and it's funny and no one else is talking about that. But it was his job to actually have value in it for his audience. So the way that he interviewed me to tell the story taught me how to tell a good story. And it pulled out value that I hadn't even seen myself. And it took this stupid tattoo story and turned it into this like life-changing situation that taught me how to be brave. It taught me how to take chances and believe in myself. And it's why I know that I could do things on my own. And I quit my job and moved across the country and launched a company. All of these things that I never would have done if I hadn't had this experience of being completely alone in a country I've never been to where I didn't know anybody. And that just happened to end in a tattoo shop. So he pulled out all this value. And fast forward, he actually wrote the foreword for the book. And that the entire penis tattoo story is chapter 2. And the title of the chapter is The Girl with the Penis Tattoo. But the whole premise of the book is helping people do exactly that. How do you take those stupid stories that you never would have told anybody and actually make them valuable? And how do you find the hooks? And I didn't want to write the same storytelling book that everyone else was writing. That was all about the big stories. So find your tattoo story.
Wow, I have that. There was 26 questions that I had during the course of hearing that, and there's only one that's coming out. So, and you sort of answered it. So, he wrote the foreword of your book. Yes. I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, you're telling this story about how you're stalking this person, and he just said, like, I need somebody with a what do you call it? A something story, a
cool story,
a cool story. Okay, because he knew that would hook his audience. He's shepherding he's the Sherpa of his audience, right? And as podcasters, we don't have somebody giving medical advice on our podcast because that's not our audience, right? Our audience is someone like yourself that helps content creators, entrepreneurs, get better, learn, all of these kinds of things. So he's the Sherpa for his audience. And you say this about the penis tattoo. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, why did he immediately go, boom, I'm going to ask her to be on my show, knowing you had never been on a podcast before, right? Was he so confident in his skills to be able to interview and get out the content that he needed to serve his audience? Is that, I mean, I'm like, how does that even happen? Where either he's thinking, well, this is either going to be a train wreck and it's never going to see the light of day or the light of an iPod or at the time or whatever, or this is going to be the greatest show ever. And I'm going to one day write a foreword to her book. But I'm just,
I don't think he saw that part coming. And the best part is he was my second choice. And he knows that because he said that he would help me connect with the person who was my first choice. And that person said no. But then I was like, wait, why am I even looking anywhere past Joe? Like naturally he should be the one to write it. But I think he was just like, this is a great hook. And this is funny and it's going to get attention from the beginning. And he taught me the way that I tell stories now. He calls it the James Bond method, where you just start in the middle of it. So I started in the middle of it. And I just told him the hook. And his goal with hearing a story is he wants to not know what's going to come next. And he wants to be hooked to the point that he wants to hear more. And that's exactly what happened. I gave him the hook and he's like, okay, how did that happen and why? So I gave him exactly what he was looking for without realizing it. And it's actually on that same page that has the before and after slider, the favoriteautomedia.com/tattoo. He's on my podcast and he's telling his side of the entire situation. And yes, the title is Stalking Benjamins. But I love a pun. I am the stalker of stacking Benjamins, but he tells his side of it. And it was a really cool full circle moment. And a really, I got to ask him why he said, here's my phone number, let's meet tomorrow, instead of security when I approached him saying I've been stalking him for 3 days. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for the question, but I'm glad it happened.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, and it opened so many doors for you, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, the first podcast you were ever on was Stacking Benjamins. And, it's only downhill from here, right? You're on Dealcasters. No, which is why she didn't bring a mic to the show. But no,
I didn't come here to be bullied.
Yes, Chris, you should know.
Ladies
better.
and gentlemen, we take full blame for the microphone thing, but it doesn't matter because all that matters is that your story can be clearly heard and understood, and that's happening. You don't need some, super expensive mic, and those things stop working anyway. So why even buy those microphones? Sorry, Amazon. No, I'm kidding.
I think you just lost your slot.
Yeah, no, we're still live. We're still live. It's all good. And Nina thinks we're hilarious. Nina, thank you for joining us. And it looks like Marco heard his name from Portugal.
Hello.
Yes,
exactly.
Close. Novo.
Yeah,
Polo Novo. It's close.
So I don't know if I think he joined us, but he may not have heard whether or not your tattoo is correct Portuguese.
Yeah.
So
moving on.
Oh, okay.
I can only get one tattoo covered, okay?
Okay.
We just have to stick with the assumption that it's right.
Well, it's good that it's cursive because apparently a lot of people younger than you can't read cursive, so you're good.
That is true. And even like people who can, it's very hard to read. I have one on my back that's a quote, and it's in like typewriter font, so you can read it from a mile away. And I wanted some kind of like difference. So this one is hard to read. My dad thought it was I accidentally drew on myself with Sharpie. He didn't think I got a new tattoo. But you would think that the first time I did it, I would stop getting tattoos as souvenirs when I travel, but I did not stop. So this one is always done in Lisbon.
Okay. So then I guess the question is, have you stopped with getting tattoos overseas after the second one? Do you think you finally
unfortunately,
have got that
yes, but only because that was June of 2019. And then we got hit with Panny. And I haven't left the country since.
Why is this the first time I've ever heard someone say "hit with the panty"? I'm not. In fact, I'm not even comfortable saying that out loud. But I think it's like though if you say it, but if you say it, it almost feels like I'm taking the power away from it. Right? We're just calling it the panty. Like we don't want to use the word the full word. We're just going to call it the panty. Okay, so
not enough airtime.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Let's change that. Let's not give it the power that it doesn't deserve. All right. So
we're going to get right back to the show, but first I've got to share this genius tool with you. It's called the PlexiCam. You can say goodbye to awkward eye contact struggles on your live streams, your presentations, Zoom calls. This PlexiCam lets you maintain eye contact effortlessly by simply attaching to your monitor. It's compatible with webcams, phone, DSLRs, you name it. It's like having a personal eye contact assistant. Jim and I both love ours. So level up your eye contact today. Check out the links below. Now back to the show.
Storytelling. That's what we're talking about here.
All right.
What about? And I know you've taken stages. You've done podcast movement, Podfest, and you work with people who've done that. Obviously. And guesting on other people's podcasts. What are some maybe do's and don'ts? And maybe some quick, obviously like the whole elaborate process, folks, you're going to have to pick up the book, open this book, available here on Amazon. You can go to favoriteDaughtermedia.com/open this book, and it will go there and take you to Amazon to pick it up. But I'm thinking like quick tactical things that someone can kind of utilize in order to kind of like, okay, I can go here to unlock the story that I've got in my storybook of, I'm showing up on Sarah's podcast. She's going to ask me about certain things. How am I going to get to my story from here? And what are some don'ts too for people who are podcast guests?
So there are 4 things that I think make a story compelling. And so when you're trying to tell a story, you want to hit on the 4 things. So the first one is that it's relatable. And that's one of the reasons why I say you don't have to tell that big, massive, life-changing story. And part of being relatable also means that it is emotional, because we all relate to emotions. We all have this, we're working with the same spectrum of emotions. So having something that is going to hit on any of the emotions. It does not have to just be sad. It can be joy. It can be anxiety. It can be fear. It can be any emotion that you have. But just have it be relatable and have it having the right amount of detail. This is kind of like a do and a don't. Because if you think about the last time your mom told you a story, you'll know what I mean by the right amount of detail. Because my mother is the CEO and president of too many details, to the point that every time she tries to tell me a story, it starts with the ending of the one she tried to tell me the week before, but never got to it because she told me too many ridiculous details I didn't need to know. Don't do that. Think of the details that are actually necessary to know to follow the story and like set the stage. And the more you tell the same story, you're going to start to see the reactions of the audiences and know which details are important and which ones they kind of fade away from. Like, okay, you can leave that out. It doesn't really matter. But have the right amount of detail that gets them to actually pay attention. That's 2. Of course, I'm going to forget my list. Emotional, relatable.
Well, let's put a pin on this, because I love how you went with and this applies to speakers in public places, but also virtual, video live shows as well, is see the reaction, like feel and see the reactions, right? And if you're giving too much details, if you're giving too many details, you're likely to get less of a reaction, right? And so it's like developing a story is like, it's not a one and done thing, right? You're constantly chipping away and in crafting this sculpture, right? That you may never be actually finished, or probably not perfect. Just like anything, right? You're constantly looking to improve this story and getting those reactions, not asking your family what they think about stuff, because they're probably going to tell you something that you want to hear, not necessarily what you need to hear. And surround yourself with people that are like, you know what? You said too many details here, Sarah. Like, you didn't have to say this and this and this and this, and, actually give you constructive criticism to help you.
Yeah. The tattoo story is a story that I have told at least 100 times at this point, but I don't think I've ever told the same story twice, because every time it's a little bit different, because every time there's a different detail that is going to connect with the person I'm telling it to. And so I'm going to add that one in. Or there's a piece that I had told the time before and didn't really seem to matter, so I leave it out. So every time you tell a story, you're going to tell it a little bit differently. And every time you tell it, you're going to tell it better. And I tell people to practice storytelling, but I don't mean it in the way that people seem to think. Like, I don't mean write it out and read it or tell it in front of a mirror. Just tell it to as many people that will listen. Or tell it to, when you're on a treadmill for half an hour, just tell your story. And see what feels natural, see the ways that it comes out. And the more that you do it, the more you're going to be able to hone in on those important things, which are, it's expected, unexpected, it's emotional, it's relatable, and it has the right amount of detail. The one that I always accidentally leave out is my favorite one, and it's the unexpected piece.
Yeah.
And that is the one that really gets people to keep listening to the end. But the way that I tell stories is a little different, and it sounds counterintuitive, but I start with the hook.
Yeah.
And even though I'm saying make it unexpected, it doesn't have to be at the end where you get to the unexpected. It could be the beginning.
Yeah.
So when I just come out and say, I ended up with a tattoo of a penis while I was in Ireland, even though that's the first line of the story, you didn't expect me to say it.
Right.
And by starting there, it's like those movies or those TV shows where it starts in a strange situation, and then the voiceover comes in with, I bet you're wondering how I got here.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. And the best part is people are wondering that. There's a reason that cliche works every time in movies. That they want to know what happens next, because where you started was so unexpected. that it's impossible for them to just make up the narrative in their head of how that must have happened.
Yeah, Sarah, you bring up a really good point too, and this is something that I know a lot when I've been creating content. It's just that whole thing of by repeating, like here we're talking about the story, right? You get better at doing it naturally as opposed to, I've got to read this script and make sure I tell every part of the story. But even like you said, right? The 3-word story, she said yes, right? And then it kind of leads to that emotion that allows you to tell it in your own words that is more relatable, as opposed to, I've got to make this grammatically correct and all those kind of things. I think that's powerful, and I think that's definitely something I took out of this.
Yeah, people are one of the biggest fears that people have in the country is fear of public speaking, and so much of that fear comes from this feeling that they're going to be unprepared or they're going to mess up, and that is a perfect reason to rely on stories, because you can't be unprepared. You lived through it, and you can't really mess up because no one else was there.
Yeah.
So there are times where I change minor details so that it relates better to the people I'm talking about. I don't change it enough that it's going to impact the message or the story as a whole. So I'm not lying, but I might change a really small detail because it'll make more sense to this person. It'll connect better with this person.
God, that's the most key thing I think I'm taking from this, because like, if you're someone who, like, back to what you said originally, if you're someone that wants to be a thought leader and so one of the big things, everybody wants to be guests on as many podcasts as possible. Well, not every podcast is the same. They're all different niches, and you're going to be one time you're going to be speaking in front of like mattress retailers, and then another podcast you're talking to like keynote speakers, and but you have the same story. You have to, but if you know it well enough and you've not rehearsed, maybe that's a bad word. You've worked on it enough to where you can craft it and cater it to that audience. It's going to resonate with them. People can identify with it. And you just have to, whatever story it is, doesn't have to be a penis tattoo, but like whatever the story is, you can cater it to evoke emotion in that particular audience, in that particular niche. That's something that is so underutilized in podcasting in general, because people get on all these podcasts and they seem to be saying the same thing on every single one of the podcasts. So why would everybody follow them and go and listen to them on all these other different podcasts if they're just saying the same thing?
Well, I think that's kind of the difference there, is that you're not listening to the podcast because of the guest. You're listening to the podcast because of the podcast. So if you go on 10 podcasts and you tell the same story, they all have different audiences. Yeah. So it's not going to be the same people listening all 10 times.
Right.
It's going to be completely different people. So it doesn't matter if you're telling the same story because you're telling it to different people. But when it comes to like changing small details, think of the last time you went to a concert and there's Saturday night is in the lyrics, but it's a Friday, so they change it to Friday night and everyone screams. Or they say a town name, but they change it to wherever they're playing and everyone goes crazy.
Sure.
They didn't change the song. It's still the same song. Everything else happens the same way. It's not enough to make a difference. But the way that it connected with every single person there, that it evoked an emotion and made them all go crazy.
Yeah.
That's what you're able to do on a little bit of a smaller scale. Don't expect screams, but you can see just from that the impact that it can have when you just make it connect to people a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll call that a mic drop moment, Chris, since we can't see her.
I might as well. It's broken anyway.
Sarah, you're awesome. You're hilarious. And one of the funniest guests we've ever had on there. And Jim is incredibly hilarious. So that's a real compliment there. Ladies and gentlemen, go to favoritedaughtermedia.com. Get the book. Open this book, The Art of Storytelling for Aspiring Thought Leaders by Sara Lohse. And you might have to read a chapter about a penis tattoo, but I promise you, it's well worth the read. Check out Branded Building Brands That Stick. Sarah does the podcast with our buddy Larry Roberts. who's going to be on the pod as well, hopefully shortly. And Sara, this has been awesome. Any other places where people can connect with you? I know you're on all the places, but where do you love to hang out?
I've been using LinkedIn a lot more lately. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, it's just Sara Lohse, easy enough. And then, if you want that free download, like I said, the book is written as a journal. So all of those writing prompts and journal entries are separate. So go to openthisjournal.com and you can get it for free.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you, Sara. And to everybody that's tuned in, Nina, Marco, tons of people over on LinkedIn couldn't pull in those comments for whatever reason today. So we have gremlins on our side too, Sara. So there you go. We're just technologically challenged here on a Friday. But to everybody, as always, don't fear the gear.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations, you've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live. Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.